Hello, families, and welcome to another episode of Thriving Special Families. I'm your host, Crystal Sanford, your autism and IEP advocate. And I'm so excited to be here with you for another episode. Today, we're going to talk about navigating the adulthood IEP transition. And I'm so honored to have my special guest today, Angela West Brown. Hi, Angela.
Hello, how are you?
I'm so good and so excited to have you here today.
Likewise.
We have so many parents with questions. This is such an important topic. So again, I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
So parents, if you are joining us via our podcast, welcome to the Thriving Special Family family. If you're watching us live, then welcome as well. We encourage you to add your questions or comments to the comment section. We'll do our best to answer those along the way today. Lastly, parents, always know that the information that is shared here is for your informational purposes only. If you are in need of medical or legal advice, please do contact a professional in that area. So let's get started with Angela. Angela, let's see if we can fix that feedback I'm hearing a little bit.
Okay.
Let's see. So parents, Angela West Brown, Angie B, as she is called, is an individualized education program transition coach. She's a consultant and author. She's a special needs sibling, wife, mom of 4, and she's an educational empowerment speaker. Angela's passion for America's intellectually disabled youth is driven by her firsthand experience covered in her book, Lost and Found, and she discusses there in her book what happens when effective adult transition planning before high school graduation is not set in place. In her book, Lost and Found, she wrote that to provide resources, tools, and support to families who are advocating for their loved one with special needs. Also, her book provides support for the entire family. So it just sounds like a wonderful book, and I'm just so excited to have you here to share your resources. And tell us a little bit more about your story and what led you to become such an empowerment person for special needs families.
Okay, so growing up, my grandmother raised me and my sister, and I learned just from, being a sibling and then working for the Department of Family and Children's Services, ABD, which is Age Blind Disability Services, and learning about all the supports and waiver services that were not shared with my grandmother. She did not know it existed. So just looking back in hindsight, that my grandmother did what she was told, basically, like any parent would. If the IEP team is telling her this is what's needed, or, basically it's just almost like a one size fit all. She didn't know that she could exercise her rights and, give her inputs, and her voice mattered. She just thought that, okay, these are authority figures at this table. Let me just sit here and do what they're suggesting that I do, because I don't feel I have any, say so in this process.
Yeah.
And
so I feel that same way.
Right. And I did not realize what was going on as a sibling until I got older and I became an adult, and I saw, firsthand what happened when my grandmother didn't know about those resources. And then my sister ended up being lost to the streets. And so much happened to the point where I adopted my niece. My husband and I were raising her as one of our own, but it just caused a lot of heartache for the entire family because we didn't know about early preparation. And then I talk about as well how even though the siblings are seen as just bystanders in the home, I also coach siblings to understand that you have power in the IEP process and the journey with your sib as well, and to have the parent to give the sibling the opportunity to help out as well. So that's why I stated that this is an entire family effort, that everybody's voice matters, giving the sibling the ability to be at those IEP meetings as well. So because a lot of times, like myself, the sibling is now an adult. And
Right.
now they have a role in their sibling's life just as much as the parent does.
Right. Right. That's awesome. Wow. And what a powerful component to bring in that sibling to be a part of the team, an active member as well. It's awesome.
Yes, yes, it's so valuable.
Mhm. So, Angie, tell us just how soon is appropriate to begin that discussion about IEP transition?
I have some super moms and dads that are like, you know, Miss Angie B, Coach B, I'm ready to get started now. And their child is elementary school because they understand how
Okay.
serious this is. Once they come to my courses and come to my trainings, they're like, oh my God, I thought this was transition in the classroom because keep in mind, transition is not just transitioning out of high school. You have transition from elementary to middle to high. You have transition throughout the school day. And so when I had those parents that had elementary level students attend some of my trainings and they were like, oh, wow, I thought this was something else, but I still feel this is valuable to my, experience with my child as they get older. But to answer your question, I prefer that parents get started at age 12, so middle school.
Okay.
But at a federal level, everything has to be in place by age 14, 16, depending on the state. But everything has to be in place by age 16.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's wonderful. And I too do some coaching with families, and do some classes, and we just did one this Saturday, and that's exactly what I talk about as well. That by age 14, for sure, here we are in California. The process needs to begin. So you're saying age 12, it's not too soon to get started, and that's great.
It's perfect.
Yeah, great, awesome. And families, if you're just joining us, welcome again to another episode of Thriving Special Families. We are sponsored by Stanford Autism Consulting, where we provide advocacy and help you to advocate for the special education your child deserves. So our discussion today and our topic is around an IEP adulthood transition. And we're here with Angie B, Angela West Brown. So, Angela, what is your first tip for parents who are navigating that adulthood transition? Let's say their child is in high school. What advice do you have for them?
My advice is to please make sure that a community agency, a transition agency has been invited to the meeting. That is something that is not happening. I have talked to special education teachers that were not aware that the outside agency or community agency was supposed to be invited.
Mm-hmm. So here in California, we have what's called the Regional Center, and that entity provides supports to families, and they really ramp up their services once a child turns 18. So I think that entity, that service coordinator, can attend the IEP meetings with our parents.
Yes, yes. And make sure that they are in attendance. If they're not able to make it, if this is a transition IEP meeting, I think it should be postponed until they're able to be, present at the meeting. Because a lot of times these transition programs need to have different eligibility requirements completed. Sometimes it takes maybe a year or two to complete the entire process. And you need to know if they're going to give you some type of funding, like vocational rehabilitation services is one of ours. They need to be present in case you need to know if there's a part that you may be responsible for, and if there's a part that the agency will pay for you as well.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And such good information. Let's talk a little bit about the timeline. You talked about, like we said, federally, age 14. Kind of walk us through what happens from age 14 to the time, let's say, a child obtains a diploma or a child is diploma bound.
Okay, so what happens is first, those transition assessments, those age appropriate, let me be very clear, age appropriate transition assessments must be completed. That is the foundation before we can do anything with this process for the transition planning to take place.
Mm-hmm.
Each annual transition meeting, in which this is just like your regular IEP meeting, it's an annual meeting that takes place. But I encourage parents to give themselves different checkpoints based on, and here's where I want you all to kind of follow me. So you have your post-secondary goal, which is this, right? The bigger picture, what's happening, after they get out of high school, they reach age 18. Okay, the smaller goal is that annual goal. Okay, the post-secondary goal is driving that annual goal for the transition annual goal, and then we crunch this down a little bit more into the objectives, the transition planning objectives and goals from there. And that is something that you will collect data on. You'll track the progress. You will give yourself what I call, because I kind of intertwine my actual life coaching aspect to this as well. You'll put those actionable steps in place to make sure that you're meeting each goal. Mm-hmm. And so once your child reaches the 12th grade, age 18, you should have already completed the legal aspects of this, as far as in with guardianship, power of attorney, conservatorship. That's the money piece of this. And then we're going to talk about the SSI, the financial part of this. Like all of those different moving pieces takes place. It's going to take longer than our session here to really give a to Z, but I'm just giving kind of just an overall where when you start, you have your transition assessment, it sets the tone. At the very end, what should have been in place throughout that process is the legal ramifications, the guardianship, the colleges should know your child is coming. You should have already reached out to disability services if your child plans to attend a college. The vocational rehabilitation should have known that your child is on the way and know what the entrance time frame will be. You will know whether your child will go into a more independent living status or situation, or if they're going to be home with you, just maybe doing a job in the local community, and what that community activity will look like. Will they work at a pet store? Will they, if they love animals? So it's very, and like I was stating in the very beginning, IEPs are not a one-size-fit-all type thing. And this really helps to create that, individualized, because when you say IEP, a lot of people really don't understand what IEP is. It's something that's very unique and specially designed for your child. And so when you think about that, I can't give just a cookie cutter timeline without really assessing and learning your child and learning your family and what you see for the future for your child and for yourself in relation to your child. So it's beautiful and it's very intricate. Yes. And it's good to start early because of that.
Wow. So like you said, so many moving pieces and so many things to put in place. So it's really important to start that, like you said, at age 12, 13, 14, so that by the time they're ending high school, we're seeing all the, pieces come together.
Yes.
What advice do you have for our families who have children with high needs? These young adults will leave high school and move into the school district's transition program and then continue until age 22. What advice do you have for those families?
My advice for those families is to practice self-advocacy now. I think that's the most important part of all of this for our high-functioning students and the families. Start getting that into play now. Because I say that because one of the colleges I've worked for, I did one of their parent orientations for one of their inclusion college programs. And a lot of times, parents are not aware and the student is not aware that, and I've had a parent call me like, why, my child's supposed to get these accommodations in college, da, da, da. I said, we go into something else. This is not covered by ADA anymore. This is something that's an 88A and 88
Right.
and F504 is something totally different. But
Right.
even still, your child has to self-disclose their disability in order to get those accommodations. And so that goes back into being able to advocate for themselves.
Right. That's really important as an adult, I think, because we have as parents maybe taken that role for so long, but we really got to teach our kids how to do that for themselves. You're right, as they,
Absolutely.
move on to adulthood. Now, for young adults, maybe they are impacted by different disabilities, quote unquote. Maybe it's they have intellectual disability, cognitive challenges, health needs, where they're going to be home with the parents. They'll continue on here in California into 22 and a half, and then they'll transition into like a day program. What advice do you have for those kinds of families?
Just make sure that even though they're not going to follow that same track that we just discussed, they can still have a meaningful and fulfilling life.
Yes, I totally agree.
So it may not look like the next person's child. And I think that's the main thing I wanted to talk about, not comparing. Families and, because sometimes we kind of get caught up in that, and it's like, well, Miss so-and-so's child is doing this and doing that. But what's fulfilling for your child? So I think that the key to all of this is just making sure that you tap into your son, your daughter, and see what will make them happy, what will fulfill them, how does that look for them, and how that will look for you. How do you want this to go for the rest of your child's life and for the rest of your life, and be at peace and comfortable with that. So I think that as long as you are tuned in to your child's needs and tuned into your needs as a caregiver, then everything will flow.
That's great. That's great. And that quality of life. I'm a big proponent. I always say that every child can learn given the right supports. And I've seen kiddos, like you said, who are significantly challenged, but they can clean tables, they can go to the gym, they can learn how to navigate possibly public transportation with a job coach or with an adult. I mean, there are still spaces where they can live a fulfilling life as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. So our next question is, tell us what pieces should be in a typical, and I know it's so individualized, but in a typical transition plan in high school.
Which piece is the more impactful?
Yeah, what do you always encourage your parents to maybe make sure is added or included in that transition plan?
Oh, wow. So I think just in the IEP process in general, whether it's the transition service plan part of the IEP or just the IEP in general, K through 12, that parent input statement. I have seen so many times where that parent input statement is like a one-liner. I'm like, no.
I know. Yeah. I feel the same way. Yeah.
So that is the most important to me.
Yeah, having that parent share their vision for their child and then pulling in the child as they get older as well. What is their vision for themselves? Making sure that that's clearly articulated in the IEP. I agree.
That takes me back to the person-centered training I had 2 Saturdays ago that talks about making sure that student is involved in the IEP process as well.
And I've had parents ask, how young, how soon should we have them be involved? We know that, age of majority is 17, 17 when they get informed about their rights, 18 when they take on all the responsibilities, age 16 when they should be invited. But how soon do we get them involved in their own IEP?
I think as soon as possible, I think for me, 11, 12, I love that age because it's like a coming of age type of, energy around that age. And it's the time where they start to really come into themselves and understand, like, this is how I want to show up in the world
Right.
at age
Right.
12. So I love that number. I love 12.
Okay, that's awesome. So what if parents are already in high school? Maybe they're watching, they're listening, and their child is, let's say, 11th grade, and they're just now kind of getting on board with the transition and learning about this. Is it too late? What can they do?
So that's one thing that I really, really love to enforce and just show parents that it's never too late.
Okay.
Not to feel like, I messed up, I'm a bad mommy, or I'm not a good daddy because I didn't know. Like, no one can fault you for something that you didn't know existed,
Exactly.
And that takes me back to my grandmother. She did the best she could with the knowledge that she had. And that's the same thing with you, Mom. That's the same thing with you, Dad. You're doing the best with what you have right now, with the information you have right now. So I think that right now, the best thing to do is start researching which transition services that you would like your child to participate in that will cultivate those adult life skills and different functional learning and executive learning skills that you want your child to start learning. And then keep in mind, I always give parents kind of like this silver lining per se, that when you start talking about ESY, and I know I'm not gonna go into that, Chris, I know it's really heavy.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, but when you start talking about ESY, summer school, and comp ed, and all this other good stuff, team, and to say, hey, I want my child for 11th grade year, summer of 11th grade year, I want my child to start participating in a transition service plan. A transition service that will help my child kind of not catch up, but get them on track. So you can use the summers as an ESY platform per se to get your child back on track.
Well, that's great. That's a great tip. That's good advice. Thank you for sharing that. Well, parents, as you're listening, and if you're watching us live, feel free to add any final questions to the comment section, and we'll do our best to answer those before we end. Now, Angie, I'm going to ask you a question. Again, like we talked about, some things are hot topics, and here's one of them. Diploma versus certificate of completion.
Ooh.
Now, we could spend a whole show going on talking about that, but what are your thoughts?
I'm going to simplify it as much as I can. Okay, so with a certificate, if your child has hopes or dreams or desire to go to a 2-year, 4-year community college, that will not be the best track to pursue for your child. Because it's just a certificate of completion. But if they receive the diploma, then they have more opportunity, they have more wiggle room, more flexibility to say, hey, I want to go to a 2-year college and then move on to a 4-year school that's specifically designed in mind with my needs that I may need while I'm attending school, with disability services as my supports. Or I may want to just go into the workforce and work for a year or two before I go into college, but I have the ability to do either or. Whereas a certificate, you're really stuck, and there's no other alternatives that you can take.
Right. One of the benefits, at least in the community college level, is you can attend a community college with a certificate. I mean, you wouldn't be hindered in that regard, at least here in California. They could at least start a community college, without a high school diploma required. And some of our kiddos who have more significant needs, that might be the highest level that they'll be able to attain is that certificate. So, just so that parents know, both sides and that there are options. But if the child has the capacity with support to obtain the diploma, then for sure that's probably the route to go.
Right.
Yeah. So Angie, my last question, maybe second to last, is what success stories do you have in supporting families in the adult IEP transition?
One recent success story is a mom that did not know anything about the transition planning process, didn't know where to start, what to do, how to do anything. And she did not know that a agency rep should have been invited. So, you know, they had the meeting, didn't have a rep there. She thought it was normal protocol and that it was too early because her child, I think, is 14. So she thought, it was too early and it was okay. And just letting her know what her rights are and what's, available to her. Like that is like, beyond this world, just something that I enjoy. And I'm talking, but I'm also thinking about a lot of my special education teachers. They're like, I didn't know. Like, so I want to share that, it's not always that the teacher doesn't want to do that, part in the process. They may not know what to do and when to do it. So it's kind of like a twofold situation where I've learned that special education teachers may not be aware, as well as the parent may not be aware, but just giving those ahas and light bulb moments for both sides is very, very inspiring for me to keep pushing, to share the information and make sure everyone knows what's, the process that was supposed to happen during the transition team meeting.
That's great. Just empowerment, the more empowerment, the better. So rewarding, I'm sure, for you.
Yes.
So one of my final questions, like I said, we could talk all day, but do you know of any specific colleges, programs, universities that really serve our young adults well?
Okay, so I'm here in Georgia. So I know that Georgia State's Ideal program is great. And I serve parents all over the country. But just right off the top of my head is, Bobby Dodd is really good here in Georgia. It's another one. And I usually have a list.
No worries. No worries.
I just love Georgia State's program. It's really, really good. It touches on all the skills that a child will need to succeed in adulthood. Bobby Dodd is a great workforce development agency here. And vocational rehabilitation is really good here in Georgia as well.
Yeah. And for parents here in California, we also have the Department of Rehab as well, where you can contact them for support for your young adult as well.
Okay.
I know that, I on the spot, put you on the spot, but I know parents can always reach out to you and find out more specifics from what I've seen in the research. More of the programs are in the middle to the East Coast, and unfortunately, we don't have as many here on the West Coast. So
that's what I've been hearing from different parents that I've helped on the West Coast. They've been saying that.
Yeah. So if parents are looking for more information, they want to learn about your services, your book, whatever it is, how can they reach out to you, Angie?
Yes. So visit my website. It's www.angelawestbrown.com. Everything that you need is there for you to support you.
Awesome. And families, if you are local in San Diego and you're just in need of IEP help in general, always feel free to reach out to us at Stanford Autism Consulting, sdautismhelp.com. So it's just been a pleasure having you here today, Angie. Thank you so much for being my guest.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed you as well.
Awesome. So we're ending another episode of Thriving Special Families, where our topic has been navigating the IEP transition. And I want to say, families, thank you so much for listening, for watching, and always remember, you're going to be okay and your child is going to be okay too. Thank you so much.